Welcome to the Royal Chronicles. We're glad to be back. I'm Hannah, one of your hosts, with Luke.
Hello.
And today we're pretty much just going to get right into it. But of course, if you're not already following us, definitely check us out on Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok. We like to keep you guys updated with what we're doing. It's been a little bit of a hiatus lately, but we're back at it. And today we're talking about Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands.
Yes, it's exciting.
Yeah, I actually did a significant amount of reading on this topic because, Luke, you brought this particular person to my attention, and I had heard of her, but I didn't really know much of her or her story. And she's fascinating. She, a lot of her, I should say, her life in total was interesting, but what I found riveting were the years that she spent during World War II, which we'll get into. But that tells you right there that this is not someone from, an ancient time or many
200 years ago or something.
Yeah, centuries past, and it's not exactly modern, but it's just far back enough for it to be kind of less known, less talked about, and modern enough for it to feel, I guess, relatable, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But anyways, so you want to just get straight into it?
I think so. Yeah.
Of course, thank you to all of our listeners, those of you who have been with us. And if you're new, which on YouTube, I've been seeing quite an uptick in subscribers, which we're really excited about. So we're glad you're here. But Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands, you want to get into it, Luke? I can just kind of give the quick little brief, let's say, I don't know, the numbers on her. She was born in 1880 in the Netherlands. And I think one of the more significant aspects of her is that she became queen at a very young age.
Yes. Which isn't horrible. I mean, that's not super uncommon with royal families, but it's never optimal when you have to make a young child the king or queen.
Right. She became queen at the ripe old age of, I believe, 10.
Yes.
And what I found more interesting than that, as you say, because it certainly has happened many times in history, that a child becomes monarch on the death of their parent or relation or whoever it was. But what she herself wrote about it later, I'm paraphrasing, but she wrote, I think it was in her book, kind of her autobiography.
Yes. Yeah, she wrote an autobiography shortly after she'd abdicated.
The way she described it was something to the effect of, in that moment, her childhood just kind of ceased to exist. Mm-hmm. And I mean, at 10 years old, that's tragic that she looked back on it that way. And she kind of described how, I don't know, because I think she was quite close and had a good relationship with her father.
Yes, even though he was very old when she was growing up.
But just the way she wrote about that, it was to me, it was just so sad. It was touching in a tragic way, the way she described that, she no longer could go, play with her father because he was no longer around. And not only that, but she had all of these rules and expectations placed upon her as a child, even though she wasn't ruling. There was a regent, obviously, her mother. She wasn't like taking decisions and things like that, but you catch my drift, right?
She and her mother began to refer to their official duties and their time in public as the cage, because of how restrictive it was for them and how they couldn't just be themselves. They had to be the office.
Yeah. Which it's impressive the way that she turned out as an adult.
Yes. And how her mother ruled as regent, considering she wasn't brought up for that either.
Yeah. And
they both were kind of thrown into it suddenly.
But handled it quite well, which is extremely commendable. You're more knowledgeable about this than I am. Do you want to give a quick little setup on her parents and kind of background leading up to her life?
Yes. So her father, Wilhelm, because all of the members of the House of Orange who rule are named Wilhelm or Wilhelmina until recently. But yeah, so he was the King of the Netherlands, and he had previously been married and had a family, including 3 sons. And everything just seemed pretty normal. Then his first wife died, and several years went by, and he remarried to a woman named Emma. Mm-hmm. And this is in his late 60s. And they had a daughter who they named Wilhelmina. During the next couple of years, all of his other heirs died of various causes, leaving only his very young daughter from his second marriage as his heir. Mm. And that's pretty much the setup.
It's not...
Everything seemed very, standard and secure. And, he had 3 male heirs.
Right. What are the chances of losing all of them?
In less than 10 years, they all die. And it's down to the little girl.
I don't know their story. Were they any of them lost in, I don't know, war, or was it all just bizarre sickness or something? Accidents.
I'm trying to remember how they all died. I know one of them was disease. I think one was an accident. I need my notes.
That's okay. It was just an off the top of my head question. No worries. So that is how you end up with a 10-year-old queen. And as you might imagine, when that's set, meaning, you're the former monarch has passed on, and there's no question now that it's you, because it's you. If that was so eloquent the way I just put that. I wrote that down. That was scripted and everything. Anyways, getting all cute with it. Anyways,
but some background to that. The lead up to her father's death, her childhood was pretty idyllic sounding. They spent most of their time at their country estates, and she and her father would go for walks in the countryside. She and her mother would play in the garden. She remembered getting horses for one of her birthdays. There were servants on the estate that would play with her and that made toys for her, and it was just all very informal for a royal family, partly because her father was basically in a form of retirement. I mean, he didn't have the duties of his office weren't pressing on him all the time at this point in his life. And he had the 3 sons. So it was sort of he and his new family just kind of got to enjoy themselves and their time.
Right. And then it all just kind of
came apart.
Yeah. Just sad. She, of course, that is Queen Wilhelmina, would not take the reins, so to speak, until she was 18.
Yes.
8 years later, of course. It's interesting. There's a little note that was written by Queen Victoria when Queen Wilhelmina made a visit when she was, I believe, 15 years old. And Queen Victoria said that the young queen still has her hair hanging loose because back in the day, a sign of kind of entering womanhood was that you started to wear your hair up.
Yes.
It distinguished you from children, which these days it's foreign. It's not really that's not a thing anymore. But so I'm pretty sure she was notating that this was still a child.
Yes.
And then she went on to say that she is very slight and graceful, has fine features, and seems to be very intelligent and a charming child. So she called her a child. These days, most people wouldn't call a 15-year-old child, but things like that just they interest me.
This was Queen Victoria too.
True.
I'm pretty sure she called grown adults,
probably.
Child.
She also commented that she spoke English very well.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Which I would expect that, of course.
And another thing that's actually sort of funny about that interaction is shortly after, the the Boers in South Africa who had originated in the Netherlands and had colonized parts of South Africa, and their republics went to war with the British Empire. So technically, her former subjects and Victoria's subjects were at war with each other.
Go figure.
She very much decided she was on the side of the Boers because they were, formerly from her country. And she pretty much held on to that position all through her life. Even though she always had a good relationship with England, she always believed that they were on the wrong side of the war.
Interesting. I recall that she that is Wilhelmina, ordered one of the Dutch military ships or something to evacuate the president of South Africa at the time or something to do with what you're talking about.
Was that the president of the Orange Free State? The
South African Republic.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Right?
Sort of a gesture of solidarity, I guess.
You know, something else that I notated, and it's not like this is the only monarchy where it deviates from what we are accustomed to, that being the Brits, is that she wasn't, they don't call it a coronation. She was inaugurated at 18. It says specifically she was sworn in.
So also some quick background for her family, known as the House of Orange. They didn't begin as the royal family in the Netherlands. Originally, they were known as the stadholders, which was an elected position. And they were voted into office as stadholders, basically like the head of state for the Dutch Republic. And then after the Napoleonic Wars, they were elevated to the status of the royal family. But they always kind of held on to that sense, and still do, of being chosen by the people and having a responsibility to the people. That's why they have to swear an oath instead of being crowned and anointed like divine right monarchs.
Makes sense. Or that's interesting. Yes. Well, moving along kind of chronologically in her life, the next big thing to happen, of course, was her marriage to Duke Henry of Mecklenburg. I can't say this. Schwerin. Schwerin. Do you know how to say this? Schwerin?
No,
I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but if you've been listening for a while, you know that that's just kind of par for the course. I do my best. We do our best, but it is what it is. And unfortunately, based on what I've read, it seems that the marriage didn't really end up being a particularly happy one.
Wasn't ideal.
No. There were, on his part at least, there were affairs, and at least in one instance that we know of, illegitimate children.
This is a much bigger deal than it was 100 years before, because we're in like literally the Victorian era and after, so like the press knows about this stuff,
so you
and
can't
it's
just
not
hide
seen
it
as
anymore.
just that's what royalty and nobility do.
Which, if you think of it, it's kind of odd that as time has progressed, something like that would become more scandalous now than it was many centuries ago. Because society has certainly become more less stuffy, let's say, as some people might put it. You know what I mean? Society in general is less conservative. And yet, when you hear of something like that, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say, what's something really inflammatory? Okay, let's say Prince William of Great Britain, all of a sudden it was discovered that he had an illegitimate child. There would be uproar. There would just be a complete meltdown of people. But, several hundred years ago, no one would have batted an eye, because that's just what happens,
Yes. But that's also part of, it's a change that you can see happening in this time period that we're discussing, where royalty was no longer seen as separate, and where the rules that everybody else had to follow didn't apply to them. The rules were starting to apply. So people started saying, well, if this is something that we think is wrong for us, why are they doing it?
Yeah.
But then now we're coming around the circle again to where, do whatever you want. Who cares? So it's a constant changing, it is, merry-go-round of opinion.
Sometimes it's just so aggravating. But anyways, she was married. Queen Wilhelmina was married in 1901 and had a series of unfortunate, miscarriages and issues with that. And it was it was kind of a troubling thing, because the successor, the heir apparent, was kind of uncertain for a while, because she didn't give birth to her daughter until I think it was 1909. So there's 8 years of a great deal of uncertainty. And who's next if she doesn't have children? And,
and just all of the pressure. Plus, isn't it 6 miscarriages? So,
oh gosh, I didn't count. There were several.
It's a significant number for a short period of time. I mean, 8 years sounds like a long time, but that's a short period of time for that much personal trauma.
Yeah. I don't know how someone like that, with that sort of job and those expectations, having that kind of personal tragedy, I don't know how people just go on with life. Yeah. But they do, and it's amazing. It's impressive. But we now get into the period of World War I.
Oh, we kind of skipped the happy ending where she actually had the daughter.
I said she had her daughter in 1909, Juliana, which, pointing out, was not named Wilhelmina.
Exactly. That's the final break in the House of Orange. Everyone before was William or Wilhelmina, and now it's Juliana.
I don't have evidence of this, but I suspect that Queen Wilhelmina was like, I've been through a lot. I'm going to name her whatever I want.
Yes.
And it's Juliana. I like that name. That's what it is.
Opening the doors of the cage.
Yes. Love it. So yes.
And they had a very good relationship.
Yes, that's what I've come to understand, which is wonderful.
Which is an interesting legacy. She had a close relationship with her father, even though not for a long time, and then with her mother for her whole life. And she had good relationships with her daughter and her grandchildren.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Which is not common for royal families.
True, it's true. But if you think about it, her parents seem to have modeled for her what it was, what family life was to be. And so as an adult, it's just my theory that would have made it easier for her to do that with her own children and grandchildren because she experienced it. That's wonderful. But so do we want to get into World War I?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, go ahead. Just open the floodgates of information.
Okay, so the Netherlands was neutral during World War I. Which is an interesting thing to think about because they are literally miles from the worst of the fighting in all of Europe. I mean, the Somme is literally a short drive from the border.
Before you get into it too much, I think this is an
short drive by American standards.
Interesting fact to keep in mind when we're talking about these things. So monarchs, much like, let's say, the president in our country, etc., are considered, well, here it's called commander-in-chief, meaning the person that's in charge of the military, right?
Yes.
Well, in this case, Wilhelmina, back then, because she was a woman, was not allowed to be the supreme commander.
Yes, I remember that.
Is that not crazy?
Yes.
I mean, it is what it is. She still, made every effort to, inspect the forces, but she wasn't allowed that, but if she had been a man, she would have. I mean, I'm not trying to get on the whole feminist thing. I just think it's interesting that, that's the way it went down, but continue.
So that put them in a very interesting position because not being an official combatant state, they could be used as a kind of diplomatic go-between between the two sides. And they did facilitate talks that led to the final ceasefire. Other things that went on, as you know, all the royalty in Europe is either related or, they're practically all best friends or, like neighbors kind of. So like we said, she knew Queen Victoria. She was also acquainted with the current British royal family at the time of the war. And then she was also acquainted with the Kaiser and the German imperial family, funnily enough. One time during a visit, the Kaiser commented to Queen Wilhelmina that his guards were all, like 6 feet tall and taller and more impressive than her guards. And she replied to him, yes, but when we flood our dikes, they're 10 feet deep. So basically saying that it doesn't matter how tall your soldiers are, my country's still better.
Excellent little quip there. But it's funny because didn't she grant him political asylum?
She did. At the close of the war, he requested asylum, and she and the the representative body of the Netherlands agreed to it. And that's basically where he and the former empress retired.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, he was called Wilhelm, so it made sense that he would go. You know what I mean?
Oh, other interesting things are, like we said, the Netherlands was a neutral state. During the war, Queen Wilhelmina, on her own behalf, with her private fortune, invested and made several very wise financial moves.
Yeah.
And at the close of the war, she came out as the wealthiest woman in the world, the first female billionaire ever.
That's what I heard. That's what I have read, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. And overall, the Netherlands came out much better than many of the states around them because, I mean, France was bankrupted. Germany was a mess. People had been starving near the end of the war. England and just the British Empire generally was financially just not in a good place. So they came out very good for what happened to a lot of their neighbors.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, that's true. And as interesting as all that is, when we get into World War II, that's where the stuff of films lies, in my opinion. But in the middle of that, supposedly she, that is Queen Wilhelmina, spent a significant amount of time husband hunting for her daughter, Juliana. And supposedly the queen was very religious, very devoted Protestant, and insisted on someone being, royal and Protestant and significantly devout, that it mattered, to them.
Traditionally in Europe, that means you're going to marry a German.
And who did she marry? A German.
Of course. Right.
So her daughter ended up marrying Prince Bernard of, oh man, here we go again with how do you pronounce this? Something Biesterfeld? Is that how you say that? Liepen. I don't know. Anyway, we really need to do an episode on anything Spanish because I'll have no problem with that whatsoever. All this other stuff, I just can't. Sorry.
It's the German words.
I don't know German.
French words can make more sense because if you just know the parts you're not supposed to say, it's simple.
Exactly. Process of elimination. So yes, she married her daughter off, which this is just an aside. And I just think it's kind of a quirky little fact that Juliana, who of course ended up becoming queen later on, her husband, Bernard, was essentially, is it confirmed he was a Nazi? Former Nazi.
Before the whole, they took over the country part.
Right. But more interesting, in my opinion, than that was that he was a founder of the Bilderberg Group, which
secret society.
If you're into conspiracy theories and you spend a lot of time going down, rabbit holes on YouTube or whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you just have to, type that into the search and you'll be greeted with all kinds of stuff about it. There, people that think that they're, I don't know, running the world. It's like the Illuminati type thing or whatever. It's funny that I've heard of that and all these conspiracy things. And then when I was reading his biography, I got to that part and I was like, oh my goodness.
I've never heard of that before.
I know.
But anytime you get a bunch of rich people together and have an organization, people are going to have conspiracy theories about it.
Well, he was also involved with, and this is just where it gets more, in my opinion, kind of comical. I believe he was also involved something to do with what is now known as Lockheed Martin or the Lockheed Corporation back in the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a big defense contractor company and then this other thing that everyone has all these conspiracies.
In what capacity? Was he an investor? Did he get a job from them or something?
He might have been. He was accused of having accepted a bribe, I guess, to influence the Dutch government's purchase of aircraft or equipment of some kind. So, there's that. And I feel like there was something else, but I can't remember what it was. Anyways, so just if you're interested in that, just look him up. As I said, what was his official title?
Prince Consort?
Prince Consort of the Netherlands. Bernard. Let's go with that. Yeah. Funny, quirky stuff. I'm telling you, when you get into these people's lives and then their relations and who all they're connected to
and what they've all done,
it's so interesting. But anyways, that was supposed to be just a little aside. But okay, back to our main topic, Queen Wilhelmina. At this point, this brings us to the late 1930s, which, as we know in Europe, means the rise of you know who and
the outbreak of war.
Yes. The Reich or whatever. Reich, whatever it is. Delusional. What did the kids say these days? Delulu. He was Delulu. But anyways, okay, so 1940, specifically May 1940, Germany invades the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands, who were neutral in the previous war,
yes,
get invaded because, as we know, the Germans at that time, they don't care about such things. So anyway, do you want to kind of give the lowdown on this as you did the other?
Sure, I can try. So outbreak of war, which basically is just an invasion. There was not a whole lot of build up to it or fighting. The German forces come over their eastern borders and start, just taking territory, marching west.
Mm-hmm.
The royal family are in the capital,
The Hague.
Mm-hmm. And Queen Wilhelmina sends her daughter and her family off to take refuge in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And her plan is to stay as long as possible and hopefully coordinate some sort of, political resistance in an attempt to move to a stronger position in, I can't remember the name of the city. She is picked up by a British warship and requests to be taken up the coast. They're on their way and they find out that the Germans they're already there and that the German planes are on the way. So they tell her that they have to go back to the safety of British waters.
Mm-hmm.
And she decides that she'll go with them. And that was a decision that apparently she did not want to make.
Yeah.
She had originally planned on staying in the Netherlands no matter what happened, but it was kind of taken out of her hands, right. And she was taken to London.
And this, in my opinion, this is where the proverbial movie begins, because she basically establishes a government in exile in the UK.
Yes.
In London, I believe. Sets up a chain of command and is finding ways to communicate with people. And at some point, she begins to make radio broadcasts, which are to her people over in the Netherlands. I think it's called Radio Oranje.
Yes.
Is that correct? And she makes a number of addresses. At one point, she calls Hitler, the arch enemy of mankind, which, of course. And it's interesting because she also, during this time when she's in exile, she makes various, I guess we call them kind of a royal tour. She goes to the US for a couple of months. She goes to Canada.
She is the first reigning monarch to speak to a joint session of Congress.
Oh, that's right. There's actually a photo of that. Actually, we're going to post links to where you can find, for example, a photo of her addressing the US Congress. There's also a clip of her radio broadcast that you can listen to, which, I mean, I don't understand Dutch, and if you don't, it's still, I love to, even if I don't understand the language, I just think it's cool to hear the original of,
somebody's speech.
Said thing. Yeah. So we'll post links to that in the description of the episode.
Definitely.
But yeah, so there's also a period where when she returns to the UK, she was nearly killed by a bombing that I think it was called Operation Steinbock, and it damaged her home in England. And I think it actually resulted in the death of some of her guards, believe it or not. But she escaped, she wasn't harmed. And it's just but all this time she's running a government, she's conducting royal tours, she's making these addresses, all while and how long was she gone from she didn't go back until after the war ended.
Yeah, for the whole duration of the war.
So
she stayed and worked in Britain
about 5 years,
did
right?
her tours.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And I read actually that it was forbidden back in the Netherlands for the Dutch people to observe, I guess, like Dutch holidays or something. Or no, wait, it was the celebration of the Queen's birthday, which is very common in monarchies. It's a holiday, it's a bank holiday, whatever. It was forbidden by the Germans, but apparently there was some little town that on her birthday they were at church, I believe, and they stood up and sang a verse of the Dutch national anthem. And that resulted in the town being fined 60,000 guilders. I don't know how much that is in today's money.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah. All for singing one verse of a song. But anyway.
An act of defiance.
Of course, the Nazis would be a killjoy. I mean, come on. Anyways, I just thought that was things like that are interesting.
Another thing that's interesting is that the broadcasts of Radio Orange were considered to be so disruptive by the Nazis that they began confiscating radios from the Dutch people.
That makes sense. Of course they would. But eventually she's able to return home. Unless, did I miss anything during World War II?
That's pretty much most of it. Like you said, she continued her work with the other members of the Dutch people in exile. From her home in London, she kind of built up a support network for people who had been displaced and were either in the UK or had gone to the US as refugees. So she did that. She kind of established a symbol for the Dutch resistance, which is a daisy. And it was just kind of like meant to be a symbol of solidarity that all of the members of the Dutch people in exile and the ones back at home who could hear the broadcasts from Radio Orange could use to sort of communicate with each other that they were all a part of the same movement. And every other major leader that she met with was very impressed with her commitment to actually still doing her job, even though she wasn't in her country or ruling from a position of strength.
Right, because
unlike a lot of displaced rulers,
she could have just gone
governments
to kick back and kind of live the socialite life.
She could have gone to the U.S. and gotten a house in L.A. or whatever she wanted.
New York, and just of course, it's amazing. That it's the mark of a true leader. What's the word I'm looking for? Someone who truly loves their, I guess a patriot. I don't know. We use that in our country. I don't know if that's a universal term.
Of a true leader, that they keep doing the things that are necessary to help their people, even if they don't have to.
A servant's heart.
Yes.
Which is something that I think often gets overlooked when discussing the qualities of an exceptional monarch. Is that yes, you're the authority and you have the power and everyone looks all this, everyone is there to serve you, but in reality, you are to be the servant. And you serve through, you make sacrifices in your life because there are things that you are expected to do, even if maybe you don't necessarily want to do them. And I don't know, that's what's to me is so special about monarchy. That and it's not just for a period of time, like 4 years in office. It's your whole life. It's your entire life, and that's what's exceptional from other systems of government. But anyways, I find it interesting because after World War II, when Queen Wilhelmina returned to the Netherlands, of course, to all kinds of support and the thrill of her people, she decided not to go back to the palace. She moved into a home in The Hague, and where she lived for, I think, about 8 months. So not a terribly long period of time. But during that time, she traveled she basically went around the countryside. Sometimes she rode a bike.
Yes.
And
she was known for that.
She was just going around kind of inspiring people and I guess trying to encourage them after having been through such a horrible war.
And after having been occupied by the Nazis.
Yes. Can you imagine the toll that must have taken on people? I mean, that's something. Yeah. Anyway. So she does that for just, shy of a year. And it's around this time that her health begins to kind of decline. Thank you. Not doing so well. And this is where we get to another interesting and I think extremely selfless sort of act on her part, in that she chooses to abdicate in favor of her daughter, Juliana, even though, she was older, but, she chose to, move on and hand it over to the younger generation because, she knew that it was time and her daughter would be more effective.
And I also think her whole reign is interesting just because it has set a completely new template for the House of Orange. I mean, the tradition of abdication, the not using the same name for every member of the family, just kind of a different outlook on the way the monarchy works.
Right. And I also found it interesting, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, once she abdicated, she went back to her how am I phrasing this? She took the title of princess again.
Yes.
Rather than being queen mother or something like that. She went back to being princess after having been queen since she was 10 years old.
Yep.
I mean, that is so, I challenge you. I'm sure it's happened in the past. I'm not saying no one else has done it. There are very few monarchs, A, that would abdicate in the first place, but B, wouldn't have to take a whole special new title that they made up for themselves. Yeah.
I am now the retired great monarch.
That's gotta be weird to people begin to call you princess after having been queen, your majesty, for however many years at that point. What, I don't know. Was it 50 plus years?
I believe so.
More than half a century.
She was 10 and she abdicated when she was in her 60s.
I believe so. Yeah. Okay. She reigned for 57 years.
50. Well,
I don't know. That little things like that just fascinate me. And she apparently was totally fine with it. Anyways, so that's basically the gist of it.
Well, and then also right after she abdicated, she wrote an autobiography and had it published.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if there was any other monarch who had done that up to that point.
At that point, I don't think so. Anyway, so I think it was it her death that caused the House of Orange, Nassau, is it Dietz? It became extinct on her death, which makes sense because she was because
she was a daughter.
Sense. I'm trying to do the math in my head. Yeah. Anyway, so that's another interesting thing on her part. But yeah, that's pretty much her. There's a lot more to it. As I say, I repeat myself. This could be a fantastic movie. Oh,
or
my
a series of movies.
Actually, a series would probably be better. Think The Crown, but more accurate. Because you don't need to make things up with her life.
And you also don't have to stretch it out as long.
No.
You could just
like a mini series.
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
Do the early life. Do the the middle with World War I, and then you do World War II, and then her retirement.
Yeah. Interesting. Apparently she's portrayed in some film from the 70s called Soldier of Orange, but I don't think it's not or is it about her? I don't think it's about her. No, it's something.
But it would be a good mini-series.
Oh, it would be fantastic. Yeah. I would be thrilled. Yeah, someone needs to do that. Although there's not a lot of film companies I would trust to do it well. That's the thing about this. We mention all the time, oh, this story's so cool. Oh, it should be a movie. Well, I'll just leave it at that. Anyways, okay, so that's her. We're pretty much, I guess we're kind of winding down at this point. Yeah. You have any other interesting tidbits or things that we've left out?
Well, a couple of things that just really made her life story kind of catch my eye and just make it sound so interesting was how it started out like, fairy tale princess.
Yeah.
Then she's forced into this new role, and it's, restrictive, and she and her mother are both having to play parts.
Yep.
And then she gets married, and it's not perfect, but she does end up having a daughter who she's close with, and that's a good relationship. Then there's a war where the whole world goes insane around her country and her people, and they're just kind of trying not to get swept away by one side or the other. And then after that's over, a new war comes and completely destroys everyone's world. And then but in the end, they win and they all get to go back. And it was just amazing to me how you went from the happy childhood to the restrictive role that then she kind of makes her own and makes better for her successors, and how you had someone who survived 2 world wars and, their country came out okay both times, scarred, but they were still together. And it was a very inspiring life story.
Oh, it's thoroughly amazing. As I was saying earlier, it's just a testament to someone who, she was born for that. She was clearly meant to be, monarch. And I'm gonna make a religious comment, and that it is what it is. In most monarchies, well, if not now, certainly in the past, it was generally it was referred to as divine right, meaning a monarch, everyone believed, including the monarch, that they were there because God had put them there. There's a lot of weight and responsibility that comes with that. But it's always interesting to me when there's many, many monarchs that fit this description. Queen Wilhelmina, Queen Elizabeth II, I think, her father, certainly King George, all people who in the beginning no one thought they were going to be monarch. They weren't raised for it necessarily.
They didn't particularly want it.
They didn't want it. No one thought it was going to be them. And then through a series of bizarre, crazy things, the crown lands on their head and they do amazing, wonderful things with it. And
they choose to do the best with what they're supposed to do. But
it's just amazing to me how they're just clearly destined for that and didn't know it. And the people that were supposed to have had that are, in a lot of cases, they either tragically die or they're absolute disasters, They
feel like it was owed to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I just think from my personal belief system and perspective, that it's a miraculous, interesting thing when the crown just happens to land on the head of the person who
will actually do something good with it.
The right person, even though they were the unexpected person. And it just happens to work out, So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. Monarchy fascinates me. Hence we're sitting here doing a podcast talking about it.
Part of it is just because it puts somebody up on a stage where you can see how, how a human personality, how a person, what they will do when they're given that position. Will it crush them?
Yeah.
Will it make them go crazy? Will it make them insufferable and like everything is owed to them? Or will they try to do the best for the people that they're supposed to be serving?
Yeah. Will some unseen, unknown switch just flip and suddenly, they're on it.
It's not always even that. It's hard work. Yeah. They choose to do it. Mm-hmm. And eventually they get good at it.
Yeah.
That's the case with a lot of the really good ones. They just choose to keep doing it as best as they can, and they get good at it as they go.
That definitely describes the late Queen Elizabeth II and her father. He was the sixth, right? George the sixth.
Yes.
Sometimes keeping the numbers straight is tough, but we all know who I'm talking about. The two of them, and I would love to do an episode on them. I'm very hesitant because they're just such monumental figures. I would have a very hard time making an episode that I was comfortable with about Queen Elizabeth, for example. There's just
such. We could do it.
Oh, we could. There's just so much there.
There's so much information.
I know. It's like, how do you choose?
Which parts do you use?
Right. It'd be tough. And her father, to me, is just an amazing, amazing person who had so many difficulties and people throw this word around a lot. He had a lot of trauma in his childhood. He had a lot of difficulties and a lot of issues, and he was never meant to be king, and, the whole family drama and all the stuff that was going on. And yet, again, the crown falls on his head through a, bizarre scenario that no one could have imagined. I mean, something that people still talk about today as what the heck has happened here, train wreck. But anyway, and then of course he leads his country through World War II, and he was just, he didn't want it. It wasn't his personality, according to everyone and all the writing and so forth on it. But just like you say, he chose to do it. Every day he chose to do the best he could. And, and then here comes his daughter.
We need to stop being like now, we won't have any information for when we do his episode.
Okay, sorry. I really admire and find him so interesting. And then, of course, Queen Elizabeth. Who doesn't love Queen Elizabeth? She was one of the greatest. Again, what the kids are saying these days, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. She just was. She was fantastic. But anyway, okay, back to Queen Wilhelmina, or to wrap it up, I suppose. Wonderful queen, and sounds like person. Someone I would have loved to have met and spoken to. Can you imagine?
Another one of those individuals who seems like a bridge between a time period that's long enough ago that it just doesn't seem really real.
Yeah.
All the way into, the 1950s,
yeah,
which is a long time ago, but it still feels real. It still feels like a time that doesn't seem completely foreign.
Yeah, no, it's not like ancient history.
Yeah.
She passed away in 1962, which again is not that long ago. It's crazy, right? And yet she was born in 1880, and all the things that she saw and went through and yeah. She's one of those people that I think I would invite to my dinner party. Anybody in the world, living or dead or whatever,
Yeah.
She's one of those people. But anyway. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Yeah.
Thank you for coming along with us on this kind of meandering story.
Well, yeah. And if you've been here, that's just kind of how it goes with us. We usually, before every episode, are like, okay, how do we want to do this? How do we want to, map it out? Should we? And the scripting thing.
It never really goes as we script.
But I prefer it this way. It's more fun.
It is.
Yeah. And I hope it's somewhat interesting. But as I've said on many occasions, I just assume that you and I are just sitting here talking to each other. And if anyone else happens to be listening, wonderful. We hope you enjoy our ramblings.
We're so glad you joined us.
Yes, absolutely. If you did enjoy it, definitely like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you know someone who's interested in monarchy or royalty, it wouldn't hurt our feelings if you mentioned it to them.
Yeah. And if you have any suggestions for episodes or any questions or anything like that, feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear from you.
We have had a couple of suggestions that we probably need to work on.
Yes.
Yeah. Now
that we're back.
Yeah. It was kind of an unofficial break. Everything's just been so crazy lately. But we have made episodes on requests before, one being Belgium.
Yes.
Trying to think of the other one. It was quite a while ago that was a recommendation. But anyways, yeah, we'll get on that for sure. But yeah, if you have a particular family, time of history, dynasty,
individual
person, yeah, whatever it is, just, mention it and we'll see what we can do. Right. Anyways, I think that's it for today. We appreciate your time as always and hope you join us next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
The Royal Chronicles is written and produced by Hannah Mohana and Luke Haney. Executive producer Mustafa Mohana.